In a world that is flooded with media, TV shows, movies, video games, social media, how do you regulate the content that the innocent eyes of your children gaze upon when it feels as if you yourself are drinking from a fire hose? Netflix alone had an estimated 60 million subscribers in 2020, so to say that they are catering to the masses is quite the understatement. But wait, let's go back to those young, innocent eyes. What are they taking in? And is it even possible for you to regulate what they see on a screen every day?
On Netflix, 11, 12, 13-year-old children animated series in Big Mouth, very sexually explicit, including genitals shown. A boy offering to fillet his father if he doesn't have to go to summer camp. I mean, as entertainment. So you scratch your head and you think, A, who's coming up with this stuff? B, why would any publicly traded corporation distribute it? And C, where is the government when we talk about content that is potentially child pornography, potentially sexually exploiting children?
That's Tim Winter, president of the Parents Television Council, and he thinks you should be able to regulate what content your child does and doesn't consume via their favorite media platform. So whose job do you think it is to regulate media? Is it the content producers, the policymakers, you as a parent, or is it some combination of all? In today's balanced conversation that offers real solutions, we sit down with Tim to answer this question. What can you do to regulate the content flowing through the screens in your home and into the eyes, minds, and hearts of your children? Without further ado, let's jump in. Here's your host, Rania Mankarious.
Welcome to the Balanced Voice podcast. We are so thrilled to be joined by Tim Winter this morning. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Rania. It's nice to be with you.
It's nice to be with you. How are you and how are things in Los Angeles?
It's almost every day in Los Angeles is pretty darn beautiful if you go by the weather. 75 and beautiful, even on a January afternoon.
Well, we're so excited. You know, you have an incredible background, which includes so many things, but what we're really interested is 20 plus years in broadcasting, cable, internet, and new media technologies, 15 of those years and management positions with the National Broadcasting Company, also known as NBC. You were involved in the creation of MSNBC and online news joint ventures with Microsoft Corporation. You worked with MGM, where you led the studio's interactive division and its online and video game publishing ventures. You were president and chief operating officer at Fast TV, an internet media company, and so much more. You're now the president of Parents Television Council, a nonpartisan education organization advocating responsible entertainment. So we'll just start there. Talk to us about PTC, what it is and what its mission is.
Well, thank you for the nice introduction. I think my mom actually wrote most of that for me.
I did speak to her before this. No,
the Parents Television Council is a national nonpartisan nonprofit organization. We've been in business now for just over 25 years. And the mission of the Parents Television Council is to protect children from the graphic sex, violence, profanity that is so pervasive in today's entertainment media environment. Our vision is for a safe and sound entertainment environment for children and families. And when we say safe and sound, it doesn't mean that everything has to be reduced to Sesame Street. It means that you have age-appropriate stuff for kids. You have age-appropriate stuff for teens and tweens. You have stuff that parents, adults, single people, older people, everybody wants to see. But you're mindful of where, when, and how you are marketing inappropriate, edgy, I don't say inappropriate for children, edgy, explicit content to children. You want to make sure that it's a time and a place that's not within their easy reach if you can. You don't want to market it to them. You want to make sure that that we can help parents be better parents in discerning the very choppy waters of the media, the very choppy waters of the entertainment media. Right now, there are so many platforms to consume entertainment through. When I started at the Parents Television Council, it was pre-streaming, pre-iPhone, and now you just have a plethora of devices. And within each device, you have many ways for video to reach children. So it's not just television anymore. It's really all of entertainment and trying to help protect children from the proven harm that comes from their exposure to age inappropriate content.
It's such an interesting point. And I know as a parent myself of three, giving them a gadget is frightening, even if you have parent controls on, even if you say you can only be on YouTube Kids, having them have a Netflix account it's worrisome. Even if you say you can only go on Netflix Kids, I mean, having them turn on TV today, just being able to stream video, digital content is really, really concerning. And we talk every day at Crime Stoppers about what parents can do. But I love the fact that you're coming from the industry, trying to create, you're offering, you're creating and not forcing, but really pushing some really, really, really important solutions. And I want to talk to you about some of them. But first, I'm just curious, why did you personally make the move? Because you were sitting at the seat of NBC, you're at MSNBC, you've been involved in gaming, you've been involved in the TV industry for some time. Did you notice that the environment was starting to change, even though you said you made the move before Apple phones and streaming? Why did you personally make the move?
Some folks say it was quite by accident. Some folks might say there might have been a divine finger on the transaction. But I was at a point in my career where I was a stay-at-home dad for a year. And after coming out of an internet venture that we lost our investment in a streaming media technology that we were developing called desktop TV. And the investors decided that they wanted to shut us down. So I had a deal with my wife where she was working full-time in the local television news business. We had a 5-year-old little girl, and I came to her with an idea, and I said, I would like to do something that very few men get a chance to do, and that's to be a full-time stay-at-home dad. And, I would keep my finger on the pulse of what was going on industry-wise and certainly look for the right career opportunity. And along the way, while I was the stay-at-home dad, I learned of the Parents Television Council. I saw that they were looking for a number 2, the executive director of the organization, reporting to the president and founder, Brent Bozell. And when I looked at the job specification, it read like my resume. All the things that they were looking for, I had experience in. And I also had, just about the same time, one of those experiences. You're a parent, you've probably had this too, I bet most parents have had, where you're maybe not paying attention to the television and you see the children are in the room and something comes up on the screen and you go, holy cow, whoa, and you lunge for the remote and you change the channel because something happened. And it was one of those epiphanies to me that here I had been part of creating content and distribution of content for all of my career. And it was kind of a moment where I realized, holy cow, my 5-year-old's here. If I weren't here, she would be seeing this stuff. And it wasn't that I was being a lackadaisical parent. It was actually broadcast television at 5 p.m. when something came on. So it was really shocking to me. And I thought, that's not okay. And that, combined with finding the Parents Television Council executive director position, I thought, I met with Brent. He hired me as his number 2. I was number 2 in the organization for 4 years. And 14 years ago, Brent handed me the baton and said, carry on. And I've been the president for the last 14 of my 18 years at PTC.
That's incredible. And you've done some really unique things. Recently, you've obviously been talking about the pandemic and the number of hours kids are just spending online and consuming digital content. You said last year children were increasingly on screens due to the pandemic, and we anticipate this trend will only continue into 2021, leaving children even more vulnerable to being exposed to explicit content that Hollywood markets to them. Yet these are things that Hollywood companies and Washington, there are things rather, that Hollywood companies in Washington can do to better protect children. And we're urging them to resolve to make significant changes this year. That's a quote from you. And then what you did was you launched the New Year's resolution or resolutions. And I want to talk about what that is. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to go through some really, really incredible resolutions that you all are pushing out. We'll be right back.
This balanced conversation is made possible by Brigitte and Bashar Kalai, Hallie Vanderheider, Sippy and AJ Karana, and Deepwater Productions. If you're interested in furthering our mission of facilitating balanced conversations, offering real solutions, contact us at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com.
So Tim, talk to us. What is the New Year's resolution?
Well, at the beginning of the year this year, we looked at the year ahead of us, the calendar ahead of us, and what were the greatest priorities for our organization in our mission to protect children from potentially harmful material in the entertainment media. Every year we set out a strategic plan, but we decided to do it a little bit differently this year. We wanted to actually go out in the public and say publicly, here are the things that we think are urgent, most urgent priorities for the entertainment media to consider as it relates to potential harm to children. We still are in the throes of a pandemic. And what happened, 8, 9, 10 months ago, when children were told to stay at home from schools and being placed literally in front of computer screens to do their learning. Two things happened. Number one, the spike in the hours that children were spending in front of a screen. And number two, their proximity to increasingly dangerous, harmful material. And so we felt that it was incumbent upon us not just to have an internal strategy, a business strategy like most corporations have to start the year. It was important to share it widely, share it broadly, and let those whom we are going to be appealing to appeal to their better angels, put them on notice that, hey, we're coming after you. And I'm not a mental health expert, but I know that there is if you want someone to improve, if you want someone to change, the first step in a positive behavior change is awareness. We want to make sure these companies are aware, hey, you might be doing something wrong. Then we can talk about what those remedies are. But we really wanted to come out boldly, publicly to say, here we are, and here are our priorities.
It's I always start with, it's such an interesting point, because really it is so interesting when you talk about raise awareness, because we look at the images that are being out there and what they're marketing to children. And I have to say, do they really not understand? The writers, the editors, the publishers, the producers, the directors, the advertisers, those who push this content out, do they really not understand that it's not healthy for children? And if they don't, that's a huge issue. But if they do understand it and they're pushing it out anyway, why are they doing it? Why? Is it all just for the bottom dollar? And why are advertisers supporting that?
If it were about the bottom line, they would actually be creating more family-friendly entertainment. When you look at historically over the history of the industry, the most profitable motion pictures, the most profitable television shows are the programs that the entire family can watch together. It's actually not just what is the most sexy or the most violent or the most explicit or the most shocking. The most profitable is that which the most people can consume and enjoy together. I've spent my whole career in the industry, as you so nicely teed us up with a conversation, in Los Angeles, here in Hollywood, in New York City, in London, working for the different media companies I've been so fortunate to be part of. I've never met any writer, director, producer, industry executive, whoever woke up in the morning thinking, how can I harm children? Nobody does that. They are very much in love with their own project. There is a very narcissistic thread to a lot of successful people here in Hollywood, where they don't want anyone telling them how to do what they do. It's their art. And they are often motivated by being the most celebrated, the producer in Hollywood. How do you become the shiniest bell at the ball? You do so frequently by being the most controversial. And how do you become controversial in Hollywood? Well, you shred the envelopes, you push the envelopes, you do things that have never been done before. So you have a culture in Hollywood that seems to be very hell-bent on being edgy. The edgier, the better. And I think, when you look at the economics of the business, that's just not the most successful way to go about doing it. And also, to answer your question, Hollywood, you say, who's to blame for a media culture that is so explicit? Parents blame Hollywood. They say, look at all the crud you're sending our way, you're poisoning our minds. Hollywood will blame, especially the TV networks, will blame the advertisers. They'll say, well, we have to make money, so the advertisers want this edgy stuff because they want a young demographic. The advertisers say, well, we would like to sponsor something that's family friendly. There's just not enough out there. We blame the writers. And the writers say, hey, it's not our fault. We're just trying to follow the marketplace of what the demographic wants. And so they blame parents for allowing their children to watch this stuff. So it's kind of like this whole everybody's pointing fingers. What we at the Parents Television Council are trying to do is hold everyone to account. It starts with parents being better parents. It also goes to Hollywood producing better stuff and making sure they're marketing it appropriately, and to the writers and producers that they're creating stuff that fills a need. And for the advertisers, they need to know what they're sponsoring because they should be held accountable for the programs they underwrite with their media dollars.
The New Year's resolutions are really fascinating. And we encourage people to go and read about what you're talking about with Disney specifically, with Netflix, with the Federal Communications Commission, with U.S. Congress, with the U.S. Department of Justice, with AT&T and the entertainment industry as a whole. Disney, you point out shows like Pen 15, which is a coming of age series for seventh graders, where they carry out deliberately provocative and explicit content. And, again, you wonder, it's catered to middle schoolers who are going through some of the most complicated years of their lives and taking them down roads that are not healthy or wise for them. Netflix, you call up things like Cuties and Big Mouth. The Federal Communications Commission is what I thought was interesting. You're calling on the age-based TV content ratings. You're saying the system has failed. It's failed the families it was designed to serve, even according to the FCC's own review. The age-based content ratings, talk to us a little bit about that.
Most parents are very comfortable knowing about motion pictures, PG-13, PG-R. They get it and they say, well, we're not going to take Junior to see an R-rated movie when he's 5 years old. Just like motion pictures, television has rating system. When you turn on the television in the top corner of the screen, you'll see TV PG, TV 14, similar to the motion picture ratings. What most parents don't know is that each TV network decides for itself what to rate the show. If they rate it accurately, which oftentimes should be MA, mature audiences only, a lot of advertisers won't sponsor it because they don't want to be associated with explicit material. And a lot of parents would block it because it's explicit. So what some of the networks do is they rate it TV 14, knowing that way advertisers will still sponsor it, knowing that fewer parents will object to it, and there's no accountability for inaccurately rating something. So what we want is a wholesale review of the entire rating system, a reform to it. You also have now streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, and so forth. Some of those streaming platforms use the TV rating system. Some use the motion picture rating system. Some don't use any system. Some use their own system. There's no standard. So what we have is a system that now is almost 30 years old. Let's have a review and an update to the system so we can have best practices. So it's accurate, it's consistent, it's transparent to parents. And it's accountable to parents as opposed to accountable to a network executive who says, I'm going to rate it less than it should be age-wise. No one's going to hold me accountable, but that way I make more money.
Part of the resolution is a plea to the Biden administration. We'll talk about that when we return.
Do you have a child who loves to play video games? Are you curious about the link between video games and media violence? Today's tangible resource is a book called Game On: Sensible Answers About Video Games and Media Violence, and is suggested by our guest, Tim Winter. The book is written in an FAQ format and is a great reference guide that bridges the gap between media researchers and parents interested in scientifically accurate information. You can find a link to this resource in our show notes at thebalancevoicepodcast.com.
Tim, part of the New Year's resolution is a plea to the U.S. Department of Justice and says the incoming Biden administration, President Biden's administration must commit its Justice Department to vigorously enforce obscenity and child pornography laws and prosecute entertainment companies that sexually exploit children for profit. I think your work there on protecting children from sexual exploitation is an issue we need to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that we're looking at television programming wise, you'd think people like Jeffrey Epstein would be producing it to groom their future victims of underage sexual exploitation and abuse. You scratch your head. I never thought in my lifetime a video distribution platform owned by Walt Disney would have 13-year-old characters masturbating. And excuse me for being so blunt there. I'm not joking. This is now a show, Pen 15, is a show that features its adult actresses pretending to be 13-year-old girls, and they do a spectacular job production-wise, convincing you that they're middle school girls. But they're shown in front of computer screens, literally in the act of that kind of thing. And I scratch my head and I think, Walt Disney Company is doing this. You have also coming up on Walt Disney Company, a show where that basically romanticizes having a teacher-student sexual relationship, romanticizing it. You have on Netflix 11, 12, 13-year-old children animated series in Big Mouth, very sexually explicit, including genitals shown. A boy offering to fillet his father if he doesn't have to go to summer camp. I mean, as entertainment. So you scratch your head and you think, A, who's coming up with this stuff? B, why would any publicly traded corporation distribute it? And C, where is the government when we talk about content that is potentially child pornography, potentially sexually exploiting children? Where are the federal officials and the state and local officials in law enforcement who are basically ignoring this? The studios have historically done very well legally at saying, hey, this is our artistic work. It's free speech. It's protected by the First Amendment. But at some point, sexual exploitation of children has to be something that we as a nation consider as even more important than a television program that's going to sexually exploit children.
Well, we talk about First Amendment rights and free speech, but we don't allow for hate speech. So there is a line drawn somewhere. You have, I think, 1.2 million members as part of the PTC. What is the response you're getting to the resolutions? Are you getting traction? How can people get involved and support what you're doing?
Yeah,
people in the industry, how have they responded?
It's I was nervous, honestly, when most of our members are very familiar with the broadcast and cable television networks and some of the explicit material there. In the last year or two, we have added to our mission the streaming media platforms. And I was uncertain if our membership was going to be as supportive of things like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, YouTube, and so forth. And I've been pleasantly surprised to see an outpouring of support and concern. I think most parents, certainly most grandparents, now see their children and grandchildren not in front of the television set, but in front of in front of a screen. And if that's where children are going to be consuming their entertainment media, it's incumbent upon the Parents Television Council to be present wherever the children are watching, and that's where they're watching right now. I'm very heartened that our membership has been so supportive, both in terms of filing petitions, signing onto letters, making their views known, but also we're a nonprofit. The only way we survive is by charitable donations. So they've been very generous in support of these new endeavors.
And it's very important work because as you talk about how platforms are evolving and changing, and the fact that anyone right now can become their own TV streaming service. I mean, I can just put myself on live on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook or wherever, and all these different variations of these apps. Kids are exposed to such unbelievable content wherever they turn. And it is very hard for parents. We talk to you all the time. There's just no way for them to control it, even the best parent in the world, because our kids are many steps ahead of us when it comes to technology. What is your advice to parents who will support you, will sign the petitions, will sign the letters? I mean, any other practical words of advice you can give them as they navigate through these challenging waters?
Yes. Number one is silence is an acclamation that the media environment is okay. Silence allows this stuff to continue. We have to speak up and speak out. A lot of parents are overwhelmed. They think, well, I can't fight City Hall on this. Hollywood's too big. But we have seen Hollywood's better angels appealed to and responded to. When you think about tobacco on television, we don't have cigarette smoking anymore. That was something that we as a nation consciously decided was more important to our welfare. So we're going to take it away. We shouldn't be having a debate about sexually exploiting children on television and whether that's a good or a bad thing. I don't think anybody would say it's a good thing. I would think everybody would think it's a bad thing. Parents need to be part of raise your voice. Make sure you're heard. Join us. It's free. Lend your voice to our choir. If you don't want to join us, there are other organizations out there that are doing similar work. We're proud to be the biggest, but join us and don't be silent, because silent will only allow this to increase.
One of the things that you are the architect of, I'm fascinated by the national campaign for cable choice. I think this is critical. Explain it to us.
When you subscribe to cable television, you get 100, 200, 500 channels. You don't have a choice as to which you choose to bring into your home. They all come in. You can block them, but you're still paying for them. When you pay your cable bill, the cable company takes it and divvies that money up in amongst all the different networks. So there could be a network that absolutely violates your sensibilities as a family, and yet you are forced to underwrite that content that violates your sensibilities. When you go to a movie theater, you don't pay at the box office for all 10 movie theaters. You pay for the movie you're going to go see. When you go to the newsstand, you don't have to buy every magazine on the rack. You buy the one you want. And yet with cable television, and I've started and helped to run 24 cable networks, it's a great business. People are paying you even though they don't want your product. It's brilliant. It's time for consumers to have greater leverage and decide which they're going to pay for and bring into their homes.
And I guess this question is a little bit off target, but considering where you come from, you recognize that the media understands its power, and its power over political narratives, its power over pop culture, its power over mainstream culture. I mean, there's no denying that fact. It's not an even fight, though, when it comes to the consumer. It should be, because we should be dictating, the marketplace, but it seems like we're not. It doesn't seem like it's an even fight there.
Hollywood is wonderful at selective amnesia. They will talk about how important a cause is that we have a certain representation on the screens, and we want to have these social issues mirrored in so that we can really drive home a message. And when you say, what about all the violence and its impact on children? Oh, there's no impact there. Well, what about the television commercial that airs in between your program? Does that have no impact also? Because the advertisers are paying $75 billion every year to sponsor television programming, the sole purpose of which is to influence the behavior of the viewer. So Hollywood can't say, well, the commercial has an impact on the viewer, but then when they changes back to the show, there's no impact on the viewer. So many people in this town cannot stand scrutiny. They don't like being held accountable, but that's why we're here. We want to make sure that they are aware. They know the power they have. They seem to forget or decide to forget when it might be harmful. And we're here to remind them.
And, before we wrap up our time with you, you've done a lot, you've said a lot in terms of the gaming industry. And when you talk about exposure to violence, we've always said that we think that excessive exposure to violence, as kids, especially young boys, excessively game. And the way the gaming industry has moved, it's so real, it's so loud. You can feel, vibrations through your gadgets almost. It's got to have an impact on kids. And we had, through our series, we've had interesting conversations with psychiatrists and psychologists that will say the studies aren't there. It just doesn't show there's an impact, but you just can't imagine that there's no impact. And you've done a lot in the gaming industry, and you have a heart to turn off this violence that's being shoved down our kids' throats through the gaming industry.
The loudest voices in the psychological sector are sadly aligned with the media industry. You look statistically, it's about 90% of the data shows there is an impact, a harmful impact on children. And I work very closely with these scientists. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, I work with the scholars. And there sadly are a couple scholars out there who have the largest microphone handed to them by some folks in Hollywood so that they have that microphone, saying there really is no connection, no correlation between the violence in the media and the impact on the children. It's untrue. And as a matter of fact, the loudest voice in the academic industry who says there's no impact on children personally produces violent media. And yet he is a scholar who says there's no concern here. They say that an empty barrel is louder than a full barrel when you bang it. That's certainly true when it comes to the emptiness of the hollow academicians out there who will say there's no impact when there are so many out there who say this is absolutely untrue. There is an impact.
I love what you're doing at the Parents Television Council. And you started by saying, you're not trying to turn off TV stations. You're not trying to stop movies from being produced. We're not trying to stop streaming. All of this has its place, and we don't want to limit people's artistic exposure. I think we're on the same page, and we join millions of parents who say we just want to be able to ensure that the content being shown to our children is age appropriate, and maybe revisiting what age appropriate means, because as your New Year's resolutions show, a lot of the content specifically focused to young kids is really not age appropriate. Coming of age has always bothered me, especially with the Netflix film Cuties. They made it such a coming of age film. And I kept saying 11-year-olds girls who are just getting their periods are not part of coming of age, isn't learning to dance on a pole naked. That's not part of the coming of age experience. And it's very frustrating that seems to be what's pushed down our kids' throats. So we thank you for what you do. A plea to the parents listening today on your behalf would be to do what?
Remember, on something, an issue as important as this one, it takes a village. It takes a village here. We need to all be working together on this. We're not book burning. We're not trying to censor people. But when you look at the volume and degree of explicit material that's reaching children, parents, number one, be engaged, be actively engaged. Number two, join your voice. If it's not with us, with somebody else, but hopefully with us, that you can become part of the solution. But be informed, be aware, and understand if you're going to make sure you feed your kids organic food or healthy nutrition here. What you're putting into their minds is just as important as what you're putting into their bodies. And let's put healthier stuff into our children's minds. Let's create a healthier entertainment media environment for children and families.
Tim Winter, president of the Parents Television Council, you have been fantastic to speak with. We'll be following you, certainly joining your efforts. I think what you're doing is incredibly vital. Thank you for being on The Balanced Voice.
It's a pleasure to be here with the Crime Stoppers.
Thank you again. See you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Balanced Conversation. You can find real solutions and tangible resources in our show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast and on Twitter at @BalancedVoice_. Stay up to date on Rania's work by following her at The Rania Report, and we can't wait to see you next week for another Balanced Conversation.